Hey everybody, welcome to the middle of nowhere. In May of 2018, Lian Li released the PC-O11 Dynamic to much fanfare. To say I love this case is an understatement. It's stylish, can house a variety of components, and you're open to a lot of cooling options. However, to say it's without its faults would be a lie. It's a little bit too narrow to be able to house a rear exhaust fan, and you're restricted to certain kinds of GPUs that will be able to fit in it. However, not one to rest on their laurels, Lian Li came out with the PC-O11 Dynamic XL in October of 2019. Not just bigger, it came with a slew of quality of life improvements, many of which I hope make it into the original Dynamic. So come with me as I unbox this case and go over all the goodies it has to offer. Lian Li has replaced many plastic bits, such as the feet present in the original Dynamic, with metal in the XL. The chassis is still made from steel, but the top and side panels are both aluminum. These panels are 1mm thick, and the glass panels are 4mm. As with its little brother, the tempered glass side and front panels each have a black border to hide the case frame. They lay flush against the case and have the same mounting mechanisms of tabs and nubbins. The XL comes in three colors, black, white, and silver. The black and silver versions are brushed, while the white version is not. Another addition is the presence of a digital RGB accent strip in the front. The strip will plug into your motherboard's ARGB header and can be controlled by the two buttons at the front of the case or by your motherboard's RGB software. The Dynamic XL comes in at 471mm deep, 285mm wide, and 513mm high. As far as motherboards go, it's dealer's choice. You can install an E-ATX, ATX, M-ATX, or ITX board in this case. However, using anything smaller than an ATX board seems to be a waste in my opinion, as you'd have so much empty space in the case. If you want to use an M-ATX or ITX motherboard, you'd be better off using the regular Dynamic. If you use an E-ATX motherboard, you'll need a special bracket sold separately. I think for the cost of this case, Lian Li should have included it. When looking at the front I/O of the XL, you'll find a few new additions. The power and reset buttons are the same, but you'll find two additional USB 3.1 Gen 1 ports at the bottom of the case. There are still two at the top. The USB Type-C port is still present, and the headphone and microphone jacks are still separate and still 3.5mm. Finally, there are two RGB control buttons for mode and color. The internal storage has been completely revised. There are four hot-swappable hard drive bays in the rear where you can house up to four 3.5-inch drives or four 2.5-inch drives. You can install a total of 10 SSDs, and they can be mounted in three locations. 4 in the aforementioned hot swap bays, 3 on the side using removable trays. Alternatively, you can use the trays to install 3 SSDs on the Radiator tray. Finally, you can house 3 drives on the back plate in the cable management area. To do this, you'll need to remove 4 screws, then the plate, and install the drives on the side facing the front of the case. It goes without saying, if you have a Radiator on the side or bottom of the case, you won't be able to install SSDs in these locations. Installing the hard drives into the hot swappable bays is not toolless. In fact, no installation of any drive in this case is toolless. So you'll need to use the included screws to mount your 3.5-inch or 2.5-inch drives. I found the drive cage locking mechanism a bit unwieldy and dropped the screw that locks the caddies more than once. Additionally, reinserting the caddy proved to be very difficult as they do not slide back in easily. The O11 Dynamic XL can house GPUs up to 446mm in length and 169mm tall. There are 8 PCI brackets to allow for dual GPU installation and vertical mounting. The vertical GPU mount is sold separately, however. If you plan on air cooling your CPU, you'll have a CPU cooler clearance of 167mm. The XL's specification page says it supports PSUs 220mm to 280mm long. However, the image within the compatibility section of the product page says 210mm, which makes this all very confusing. After taking measurements, you have a little over 220mm of space from the back to the front RGB strip module, so I recommend not installing any PSUs longer than 220mm. Also keep in mind that the hot swap drive bays are all completely removable, so you can choose where you want to put your hard drive bays or your PSU. For instance, you can put the PSU in the top, middle, or bottom as it already is standard, or put one hard drive cage in the bottom, one in the top, and the PSU in the middle. As with the regular Dynamic, you won't be disappointed with the amount of fans and radiators you can put in the XL. On the side, you can install 3 120mm fans. On the bottom, you can install 3 120mm fans or 2 140mm fans. At the top, you can also house 3 120mm fans and also 2 140mm fans. On the rear, you can house a single 120mm fan. This is due to the wider dimensions that the XL has over the original Dynamic. The original lacks rear 120mm support, but I have seen several builds with two 80mm rear exhaust fans installed. The Dynamic XL is a water cooler's dream come true. You can house a plethora of radiators. On the side, you can install a 360mm radiator, the bottom can house a 360 or 280mm radiator, and so can the top. The rear can even house a 120mm radiator, but be careful, you might run into clearance issues. When it comes to radiator thickness, you have plenty of options with this case. On the bottom, you have 85mm of space from the radiator mount to the bottom of an ATX motherboard. You'll have no problem installing a 60mm thick rad plus 3 fans. The rear side panel area remains 50mm deep, but the clearance issues for EKWB radiators present in the original Dynamic have been fixed. You have up to 75mm of clearance from the side to the radiator bracket. As such, you can mount a thick rad in front and put the fans on the rear. If you mount nothing on the bottom, you have virtually no limits on the side radiator thickness. On the top, you can install a 40mm thick radiator plus fans. Vertical clearance here is 74mm from the top to the motherboard, and horizontal clearance from a 360mm radiator to the tray is 35mm. Should you put a 120mm radiator in the back, you'll be limited to slimmer options. One of the nifty little quality of life improvements that Lian Li brought to the XL is the addition of a removable radiator tray or fan mount at the bottom. Just remove 2 screws, push back on 2 plastic tabs, and lift the tray out. This will allow you to go ahead and pre-install the fans or the fans and radiator, and it will allow for a little bit ease of use when it comes to installing those items. In addition to the many features Lian Li added, they also tweaked some of the aesthetics of the XL as well. Gone are the circular holes, which remind me of the Imperial architecture from Star Wars. These have been replaced with more angular accents. The hexagonal holes in the PCI brackets have also changed to the angled look to keep in line with the rest of the design. The Lian Li Der Bauer plate has been moved to the bottom of the case, and the typeface has changed as well. In this location, it will more than likely be obstructed should you use radiator and fans. The Dynamic XL is also Rogue certified, and this is made known by the glass etching on the side panel. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of this as it detracts from the otherwise very elegant design, but I'm glad it's not massive and also in a corner.
Nobody puts Rogue in a corner.
Also, should anyone admiring your PC ask what Rogue certified means, are you even going to be able to answer? I couldn't before the making of this video, but I've researched the meaning, so now I can, and so can you. Here's what the Rogue Certified site says. The Rogue Certified program encompasses third-party hardware such as chassis, memory, and coolers. These products have to undergo extensive testing and validation by ROG engineers, and only the very best succeed to become Rogue Certified. Essentially, the PC-O11 Dynamic had to pass a physical and possibly take a PE test to make sure it wasn't using any PEDs, probably conducted by ASUS doctors, so it could get a literal stamp of approval. As far as I can tell, being Rogue certified actually doesn't mean or do anything other than give ASUS some more advertising space on components. I mean, my XL doesn't feel more overclockable by having this tramp stamp put on it. Anyway, I'm getting away from myself, so let's move on. The case has plenty of grommets to route your cables through, and there's loads of space to be able to tuck any and all loose cables you might have. One thing I noticed is I didn't really see a lot of cable tie-down points, but then again I could be blind. There's also a cable management shield. This is present in the original Dynamic, but the mounting method has changed. Whereas the original you had a thumb screw and 2 screws, the XL just has 4 screws. When it comes to dust filtration, the Lian Li PC-O11 Dynamic XL has you covered. There are 4 included dust filters that are held onto the case magnetically. And while the panels are made of aluminum, there are some nifty little magnetic strips adhered to the side panel that allow the magnetic dust filters to stick to them. The bottom filter is now on a slidable rail, which is an amazing improvement over the original Dynamic, as the bottom filter on the original is a huge pain in the bum to get to. As far as accessories go, Lian Li kept it very simple. You get a manual with loads of black and white pictures, which are really helpful. You get 2 bags of screws, 1 for hard drives and 1 for the motherboard, which also contains a couple of extra standoffs and a standoff remover. There's also a GPU support bracket, a rubber PSU support thingy, extra plastic tabs in case you break any. These are basically the things that you use for the radiator tray and the panels that hold the 2.5-inch hard drives. And finally, you get some Velcro ties. The Dynamic XL isn't just a larger version of the original with some design tweaks. Lian Li really introduced some quality of life improvements. Something as simple as putting the bottom air filter on rails scores massive points with me because of how difficult it is to get to that same filter on the original Dynamic. A radiator tray, hot swappable drive cages, and additional SSD mounting points are also great additions. I'd love to see these features added to a revision of the original Dynamic. Finally, the XL's increased size has given PC builders a larger playground on which to build. Our component choices are no longer nearly as restricted as they were with the original Dynamic, and now the only limitations we have with this case are our imaginations and wallets. Well, that's all I have to say about Lian Li's PC-O11 Dynamic XL. Thanks for watching, everybody. Like the video if you liked it, share any comments or questions you have down below, show support for the channel by subscribing, and don't forget to click that notifications icon so you don't miss out on any future content. I'm Seth, and I'll see you next time in the middle of nowhere.